I'm Emily Rooney. Coming up next, Boston mayoral hopefuls John Connolly and Marty Walsh come face to face for the last time before Election Day. Watch live here on WGBH2 or listen on 89.7 WGBH Radio.
Next time on the PBS Arts Fall Festival, San Francisco Opera's new adaptation of Moby Dick, a production critics called achingly beautiful and gorgeously staged. Great Performances presents Moby Dick from San Francisco Opera.
Friday night at 9 on WGBH2.
Here's a classic movie quiz. Giant, made in 1956, stars Elizabeth Taylor and Rock Hudson.
You don't look as if you've been dancing all night, Miss Leslie.
How did Taylor get the role?
I can tell you all his bad points.
Rock Hudson selected her, given the choice between Taylor and Grace Kelly. You provide the popcorn, the couch, and the TV. We'll provide great movies like Giant.
Saturday night at 8 on WGBX 44.
Celebrate the 15th annual 99.5 WCRB Classical Cartoon Festival. 15 years of classic Warner Brothers cartoons and 15 years of family fun. For tickets, call 617-300-3300.
I come here every year since I was a baby.
On Masterpiece Classic.
Who'd have thought it? The cold and careful Lady Mary Crawley.
Now, there's no point in pretending that this is going to be easy.
Lady, wake up.
What is?
You better come downstairs. Downton Abbey on Masterpiece Classic.
Sunday night at 10 on WGBH2. And don't miss an encore of Downton Abbey. Tuesday night at 10 on WGBX 44.
Are you worried that this job's going to turn us into weirdos and we'll end up with no sense of normality?
Yeah.
Scott and Bailey. Tomorrow at 10, only on WGBX 44. You're watching WGBH2, Boston.
Today's programs are made possible in part by
Cambridge Savings Bank, committed to educating young people about the role that finances play in the world around them and how to prepare themselves for the future, because legacy matters. Member FDIC.
Water droplets on your tongue. The day tastes sweet. A splash, a laugh, a smile. Our senses are the gateway to how we experience life.
Welcome to a WGBH News special presentation. Tonight, candidates John Connolly and Marty Walsh square off in their final televised debate. It's a live election 2013 Boston mayoral debate.
Good evening, I'm Emily Rooney. Welcome to our audience on WGBH Channel 2 and on 89.7 WGBH Radio. Tonight's live debate between John Connolly and Marty Walsh is sponsored by the Boston Media Consortium, which includes WGBH. The moderator is longtime anchor Artie Saul, who now teaches at Boston University's College of Communications. We have just a minute until we start, so let me introduce WGBH News political analyst and Boston resident, Peter Kansas.
Glad to be here.
Well, Peter, between the two of us, we've covered a lot of territory in the last couple of weeks, and it appears anyway, anecdotally, unscientific survey, that most people have made up their minds at this point who they're going to vote for. Of those people most likely to vote.
Oh, I think so. I don't know anyone in my neighborhood in Jamaica Plain, for example, who's not sure who they're voting for.
Really? And we've been getting a lot of those robocalls at night, people saying, you know,
oh, you're getting them too?
One for Connolly, two for, but they keep calling back as if you're going to change your mind.
Well, the key to this election is getting out your vote.
All right, we're going to go now to moderator Artie Saul.
Good evening and welcome to the 7 News Studios and the final debate of the Boston mayoral race. Cleverly sandwiched, you'll notice, between World Series games. I'm R.D. Saul. Tonight's debate is sponsored by the Boston Media Consortium. That's made up of WHDH, WCVB, NECN, WGBH TV and Radio, WBUR, and Bloomberg Radio. Let's meet our candidates. First, City Councilor John Connolly. Mr. Connolly, good evening. Good to have you here.
Good evening.
State Representative Marty Walsh, thanks for being here as well. Final debate of a long campaign. Let's get right to it. First question, and we'll work this with Mr. Walsh, you getting the first response this time, 45 seconds for each of you. Here we are 1 week away from the election, and it seems as if there's been a change in this campaign. On one hand, we have negative flyers, we have negative push-poll phone calls. Why did this race go negative, and who's responsible?
Well, thank you for hosting tonight, and I want to begin by I want to make one thank you to Olivia, a 5th grader from the Upper Kilmer School in West Roxbury, who actually made me a lucky bracelet tonight, so hopefully it works. So I want to thank Olivia, who's watching tonight. You know, I think it's the tension around the race. When I found out there was a negative flyer sent on John, I immediately called for the stopping of the flyer. I don't condone negative campaigning. I never have condoned negative campaigning. I actually called John to let him know that I was upset about this piece going out, and I asked the group that sent the flyer out to stop sending flyers out. And to my knowledge, they've stopped sending it out. You know, this race shouldn't be about negative campaigning. This race should be about how we're going to improve the quality of schools in Boston, how we're going to make sure that we can create more economic opportunities in the cities for all our city residents, and how we're going to deal with public safety. There are far too many people in this city that go to bed at night worrying about their kids.
Mr. Connolly, what about it? Why did this race go negative? Who's responsible?
Well, we had tens of thousands of flyers mailed out, which savagely attacked me and my family, put my entire background into question, and were filled with lies. It did come from an outside group. I appreciate the fact that Marty said he didn't want that type of campaign, but Representative Walsh opened the door to this type of campaign when he wouldn't sign an agreement to get outside money out of this race. As for a push poll, my campaign never conducted any push poll. I'm going to run a positive campaign, and there's nothing that I won't say directly to voters or to Marty when it comes to my campaign. So I don't think we've got any place for this negative campaign, but it does raise that larger question. When Marty has premised his campaign on the belief that he can get unions to agree to do things they wouldn't usually do, they won't even listen to him about not negative campaigning. How are they going to listen to him when he's mayor?
Come back.
My opponent made that claim the other night at the last debate, and he mentioned of the fact that I can't control unions, and which was kind of ironic because when I asked them to stop the negative mailing, they put out a statement saying that there'd be no further negative mailings before the debate. And then my opponent called the press conference, and while he was doing the press conference, he condoned a negative push poll that was been going on around the city of Boston in particular neighborhoods. Now, I certainly know the difference for the voters out there that don't quite understand what a push poll is. When you do polling on a candidate, what happens is you test a negative issue on your candidates. This wasn't a testing. This was an attack on me in certain parts of the city of Boston, and my opponent in this race
Mr.
paid for it.
Connolly responsible for that?
His campaign paid for it.
It's a complete fabrication. There was no push poll or negative attack on Representative Walsh. The article that was written on this was based on the claims of 2 Walsh campaign supporters. But let's be clear on the facts here. Representative Walsh opened the door to these outside groups coming in. They've spent over $2 million supporting his campaign and have used negative tactics, you know, as part of that support. Representative Walsh first said he didn't want negative campaigning in August, and these groups didn't listen to him then. Then they attacked on a Saturday. He said he didn't want it. On the following Monday, there were 2 more pieces, and I think it raises legitimate questions about whether Representative Walsh can display the independence that's needed when you're going to be mayor to get people to come to the table and listen.
What about it?
Adi, I'll just tell you this. My opponent, John, knows that I don't condone negative ads or negative campaigning. He knows all the way back from 2007 when he himself launched an attack on City Councilor Steve Murphy. We spoke about it then. He knows how I feel about it. He felt pretty bad at the time of doing it, but he certainly, I'm not the one with the history of negative campaigning here.
You know how you both have been characterized in coverage of this campaign. The union guy, the corporate lawyer. Has this become a class campaign, the working guy and the elitist? Mr. Connolly, you wanted to...
Well, I try to talk to people about my broader experience, and I always go back to the classroom, and that seems to upset the Walsh campaign a great deal, but that's what has impacted my life the most. When you go into that classroom and you work with young people who are facing unbelievable odds, incredible poverty, growing up, in some cases, a 12 or 13-year-old essentially raising himself. When you see young people facing these challenges, it really shapes you and it makes you want to go change schools so that they can work for every child.
Class campaign?
This campaign, I'm proud to have the support of working families in the city of Boston, and that's who I represent here, and that's who I've represented for 16 years on Beacon Hill. My life experiences have given me the opportunity to be able to be a representative on Beacon Hill that fights for better schools, for good quality education, to make sure we have opportunities for jobs. My campaign has been talking about that the entire time. My life has been predicated upon making sure we're working with people with second chances.
Mr. Walsh, why not Mr. Connolly for mayor?
Because of my record and
Why not him for mayor?
Because of my record and my accomplishments. I feel that I'm the most qualified for this race. I have a record of accomplishment.
Why isn't he qualified?
I think the fact that what I stand for. I mean, it's hard to say why he's not qualified. It's about this race is about me. I'm running this race for mayor about what I can do for the city of Boston, about creating more opportunities and more jobs, and I've done that as a legislator. I've allowed the opportunity also to make sure that we reform in our high schools and our school systems. I've taken those votes. Councilor Connolly doesn't have a record of accomplishment when it comes to these changes.
Mr. Connolly, why not Mr. Walsh for mayor?
I think Representative Walsh is qualified to be mayor, and I think he's got a great record of service. I just happen to think that mine is better, and I think that mine actually addresses the needs of Boston right now. For starters, I've been a leader on education. I'm sorry that Representative Walsh feels I haven't accomplished anything, but I can tell you today, students in Boston Public Schools eat healthier because of the work that I've done. I can tell you today, we have preserved funding for students with special needs, children on the autism spectrum, children with Down syndrome. I helped block cuts that were going to be made to programs for those students. I think my leadership on education stands out, and that's where our future is. It's not a single issue. It's the issue that connects to everything else.
Time. We got it. Let me move on to education, as long as you've both talked about it tonight. One of your first big hiring decisions is a new school superintendent. Is there a litmus test for a new superintendent? What are you looking for that's been missing in the administration of the school system? And Mr. Connolly, you get first shot at this.
Well, you look at the Boston Public Schools today, and the fact is the bulk of our kids are either not going to college or they're not ready for college even when they get there. 60% of our Boston Public students who enter community college are taking remedial courses. We have a lot of work to do to close this achievement gap, and that means we need a non-traditional superintendent, someone who works in education but doesn't come up through the farm system that produces people who continue to allow this bureaucracy to drown our schools. I want to thin the bureaucracy, put the resources at the school site level, and build schools from the bottom up. And I'm going to look for a superintendent who will embrace that vision.
I'll come back to that in a second. Mr. Walsh, same question. What are you looking for in a school superintendent that's missing in what we've had?
I think we need a superintendent that's a good listener, a superintendent that's a collaboration builder, somebody who can build collaborations between administration and the teachers in the classroom. We often have too many factors here in the city of Boston where there's a line drawn in the sand, where the teacher's voice isn't heard. We also have to make sure we have a superintendent that can work with parents and work with children, and also the understanding about special education and all of the different functions we need in the schools and system in Boston. You know, some of the advances that have happened in Boston in the last 3 years have been great advances. Some of them haven't gone far enough. We have a system where we have to close the achievement gap. We need a superintendent that understands what that means in the city of Boston. We also need an administrator that can attract good talent to our city to teach. In the school systems in Boston, we have a 89% children of color school system. We have 21% teachers, African American, and 16% Latino teachers. We need a superintendent who understands those challenges and is able to carry out.
Is a minority candidate a priority for you in this search?
I think the best qualified candidate is the priority in this search. I think if the best qualified candidate is the Latino, African American, Vietnamese, that's what we're going to look for.
And Mr. Connolly?
I'm going to conduct a broad search to find the right person. It's important that whoever that person is, that they understand the importance of cultural competency and understanding where our children come from who go into the Boston Public Schools every day.
You talked about an untraditional background or person for this job. What does that mean?
It means that typically what happens when we appoint superintendents is it's an assistant superintendent who's promoted, and usually what we say about them is they're great at working around dysfunction, because there's a lot of dysfunction in central offices in urban school districts. I want a superintendent who's not going to come from that culture, but rather is going to come in and remove the dysfunction, because the dysfunction consumes time and resources that don't get to the classroom and could make a difference for our children.
Mr. Walsh?
I mean, again, I think we need to make sure this is the most important decision I'm going to make as mayor of the city of Boston. I have to get this decision right. We've made some advances in our system in the last few years. We have a lot to do. My plan is about reforming early childhood education. We're going to make sure that we have seats for every child in the city of Boston in 4 years. And also, we're going to talk about reforming our high schools, something that hasn't been talked about in a long time, where we're going to strengthen the academics as well as create academies in the 11th and 12th grade to give young people the opportunity for a pathway to college or a pathway to career. We need to make sure we have a superintendent that understands the differences in the schools that we're going to have here in Boston.
Quick yes or no. Willing to promote from within the system?
No.
I'll look at it, but I'm looking for a non-traditional candidate overall.
Okay. Another education question. This from a voter. More on education from Lesley University professor Abraham Abadi. Let's watch and listen.
Good evening, gentlemen. I worked for almost 30 years in the Boston Public Schools at both the middle and high school levels in the bilingual program. Over 10 years ago, that program, as it stood, was eliminated. And I was wondering what you, as mayor, will do to attend to the needs of our English language learners in our public schools.
And again, the nub of the question, how will you as mayor ensure that our public schools directly focus on the needs of our linguistic minorities? Mr. Connolly, no, Mr. Walsh, this question be your first answer.
I put this in my platform. It's very important that we have ELL training in our schools. We have a plan for it. Also, when we look to extend the school day, I think this is another way we can help our English language learners. Eventually, however, what I'd like to do is look at two-way bilingual education in the city of Boston. I think it would be important to bring two-way bilingual so that every child has an opportunity to learn another language at the very young age. Other school districts in this state do that, and I think it's something we should push for in the city of Boston. Also, with the bilingual education, we have a major problem with some of our parents that don't speak English as their first language, and we need to be able to help those parents, educate those parents, so they can communicate better with the teachers, with the administrators in the school, so they can help their children with their education in the city of Boston. Those are some of the things that I want to do as mayor of the city of Boston.
Mr. Connolly.
So we're fast approaching the day when over 50% of the students in the Boston Public Schools won't speak English as their first language. We need to make sure that we are prepared to give these young people our absolute best. We're not doing it right now. In fact, we're under a Justice Department order on this very issue. So I put a quality school plan on the table that would expand our dual language schools. And Marty mentioned on the two-way bilingual. Well, we do have a few two-way bilinguals. The Hernandez School in Jamaica Plain, the Quincy School in Chinatown. We need to scale those up, and my plan called for doing that. We need to get rid of our SEI multilingual strands where we take kids who speak a whole lot of different languages and throw them all in the same class. But there's another piece here. We want everyone to graduate bilingual or multilingual. From my daughter to the non-English speaker, they should both graduate bilingual or multilingual. That's how we get our kids ready for today and tomorrow.
Let me stick with education for another couple of questions here. You both support charter schools. The Boston Foundation had a report out this last week that says, yes, they work. But the fact that they work, does it create two classes of education in Boston? Charter schools and all the others. Mr. Connolly, this question begins with you.
I think, sadly, that this debate gets trapped with a toxicity that says you have to choose one or the other. I'm a Boston Public School parent. My daughter, Claire, goes to the Trotter School on Humboldt Ave in Roxbury. Proud Boston Public School parent. I'm also pro-Boston Charter School. What I want to do is have a partnership where we have a contract that asks our charters to serve all children and then allows for us to have real collaboration between Boston Public Schools and Boston Charter Schools. That's how we can level the playing field and get these schools working together. At the end of the day, we've got to remember, it's not about whether it's a BPS school or a Boston Charter School. It's about whether it's a good school. And we want every child in Boston walking in to a school where they're going to get a high-quality education.
But has this system, Mr. Walsh, created two classes of schools? The charters doing well and everybody else?
No, I don't think it has. I think the charters have actually pushed the public school system to improve. I'm a founding board member of Neighborhood Charter School, which is in Dorchester, and it's a great school there. And we work collaboratively and share best practices over the years. One with the Henderson School, which is in the St. Mark's area of Dorchester, and now with the Harbor School. And I think we can learn a lot from charter schools and how to use best practices. And I think, honestly, charter schools learn from public schools. And I think that, again, any opportunity for a young person in our city to get a good quality education, whether it's a charter school or a public school or even a private school, I'm supportive of. But I'm running for mayor of Boston. I'm running to be the mayor to improve our public school system here in the city of Boston. And I'm going to work with the charters rather than against the charters and stop using excuses like charter schools are taking away the talent off the school system. It's important for us to make sure that we make sure the kids that are in our system get the best quality education they can possibly get. And we need to thrive for that. It's happened when we passed legislation on Beacon Hill, turnaround legislation. It happened at Orchard Gardens, where the school system is 90% children of color, and that school went from a level 4 to a level school, which means a very underperforming school, to a top-line school. If we can do it in Orchard Gardens, we certainly can do it in every school in our city.
Quick response.
My daughter goes to a great Boston public school, and it was a turnaround school. It went from the bottom to the top, and what we did at the charter school was we were modeled on the freedoms that the charter schools have. There is an issue, though. I mean, the charters have higher attrition rates, and we want the charters to do better at serving all children. But what I find when you talk to the charter folks is they're open to this. They want to work cooperatively. And one thing we could do is adopt a universal application, which is something Boston Public Schools had blocked, that would allow all the schools to go on the same list, and parents could have access to all of them at the same time.
Actually, that application was proposed by John Barrows, the candidate who was in the race earlier in this race. And John is supporting my candidacy, and we've actually spoken about that, to take that idea and incorporate it in the system.
I guess we need metrics to measure how schools and students are doing. But are we testing too much? Is teaching being hurt by too much testing? Mr. Connolly, we'll start with you.
I think sometimes we're too test-happy overall. Now, we want to have tests to measure student progress as one measure of student progress, and we want to use tests to inform us where each child needs to grow and where their challenges are, so that we're using it in an individualized manner. But what we don't want to happen, and certainly happens in some Boston public schools right now, is that we take so many diagnostic batteries that we're taking away from real teaching time. And the fact is, if we want to do this right, our children should be excited to go to school, and our teachers should be energized to teach, and there should be an element to it that's always fun. That's how we get schools to really work.
Mr. Walsh.
I mean, standardized testing should not be the only benchmark to success in our schools. And I think that what happens in a lot of schools and school systems around the Commonwealth is that schools teach to the test. And we shouldn't be doing that. And in Neighborhood House Charter School, when we had a problem a few years ago with our underperforming MCAS scores, what we did was we created a program before school and after school to get young people in the classrooms to be able to help them with their testing. And we're able to sit down and come up with some real good proposals. And actually, after doing that, when those young people took the test later, they turned it around and they did well. And our school, since that point, has learned how to adapt to make sure that our young people are able to perform in the classroom and do well with their grades, as well as perform with standardized testing.
I want to move on to an issue that has come up in the previous two debates, and it'll come up in this one right now. There's been a lot of ink and a lot of airtime devoted to the legislation that you filed, Mr. Walsh, calling for binding arbitration and the elimination of City Council review of arbitration awards in police and fire contracts. Once more, let's air this out. Why is this a good idea?
The bill I filed, the aim of the bill that I filed was to be able to come up with an agreement before it goes to arbitration during contract negotiations. When the city or town was able to negotiate with a union to talk about how you get to yes, built into that legislation was a provision that's saying that an arbitration award would have to be based on the ability of a city or town to be able to pay for that award. That's what the intent and the aim of my bill was to do. We have a situation here in the city of Boston where we had a contract negotiation that was a stalemate, where we had the police in the city go 4.5 years without a contract, and the city forced it into arbitration. The city, the second time they've done this in the last 5 years, and lost, which is not the way we should be going. The only people that are benefiting from this are the lawyers that are defending the city and the lawyers that are defending the union, quite honestly, where the taxpayers are paying millions of dollars to these lawyers to come up with an agreement, which isn't right.
Bad idea? Why?
It's a really bad idea. Look, Marty and I both believe in unions, but there's a difference here on priorities. Marty filed a bill that was written by the firefighters union. That's who drafted that bill. He filed it 6 times, and they had him file it for a very simple reason. They wanted to take away the final review of the city council to make sure that we could monitor the fiscal health of the city. Had that bill become law, it's really simple. $200 million bill put on the taxpayers of Boston to fund the firefighter and police contract. Of course I want to make sure that our policemen and firefighters are well paid, but we can't compromise the fiscal health of the city. I think there's another issue here as well, which goes to independence. If we look at that, I don't want to take too much time.
I want to hear the point, and then we'll let Mr. Walsh respond.
Marty's got over $1 million, $2 million of union money coming into his campaign. He made $175,000 in 2012 in his role as a union leader. And as a state rep, he's up at the State House filing this legislation on behalf of the unions, which would hurt the city of Boston. And if you can't be independent up on Beacon Hill, how are you going to be independent? How are you going to be independent when you're in City Hall?
Independence, Mr. Walsh.
I mean, here goes John again, exaggerating the facts. First of all, I'm honored to have the support of working men and women. John's figure of $2 million is not accurate, however. I don't know where he's making that up. But the ability to be able to come up with an agreement, certainly I have that ability. I've done that my entire career, where I've sat down at the negotiating table and come up with getting to say yes. John's approach is drawing a line in the sand. As I said earlier, the only people that make out when an agreement goes bad is lawyers. We don't need another lawyer in City Hall right now watching our purse strings in the city of Boston. We need somebody who can build collaborations and build relationships to be able to get to yes. And that's what I will do as mayor of the city of Boston. I have proof that I've done it. I've done it up on Beacon Hill with transportation reform. I've sat both sides down after the transportation reform was done, sat both sides down, which was 2 unions, and we got to yes by doing a conversation.
Let's air it out. More time. Go ahead.
Well, I think this is the 3rd debate where we're not getting clear answer on either independence or what this legislation would do. It's clear this legislation would stand to fiscally devastate the city when you remove the city council's final review of contracts that are coming in with exorbitant raises. And that means at the end of the day that you've got to choose between funding those contracts or funding senior services, community policing, renovations for parks and schools and libraries. I mean, that's why this matters at the end of the day. And you are filing bills that would damage the fiscal health of this city had they passed.
Mr. Walsh.
Again, my opponent's been in the city council now for a while, and when this negotiation was going on, and also when they were looking to extend the school day, as the chair of education, he did nothing to improve that. And I think that you have to take real leadership positions. If you look at my record, I've been very clear on, and I was the first one to come out against the arbitration award for the police department, which was not popular by my friends. And I also said to people, we need to come to a negotiation. We need to come to an agreement beforehand. John can say whatever he wants about who is the right person to, he hasn't heard this answer, but I'll be clear. Let me be clear. I will be able to get to a negotiation because of the experience I have, because I have trust on the other side of the table. That's something that doesn't happen today in the city.
I think we...
Could
10 seconds, and then we'll move on.
Listen, I've supported contracts for 37 of 40 unions. I believe in unions. They're important. But when you hit a roadblock that could devastate the city financially, then you have to stand up and say, we can't do this. And Marty wants to get to yes, but his issue is what happens when the other side is only going to get to no? What do you do then when you're the mayor? You've got to stand up.
That's where leadership comes into play. This agreement that was just negotiated that went to arbitration with the police should never have gone to arbitration. There's no reason why a city or town can't come to an agreement in 4.5 years with a union.
All right, let's stick with unions for a moment. Job creation, a voter question from Hyde Park resident Dacia Campbell. Let's watch and listen.
Councilor Connolly, State Representative Walsh. Construction jobs have been a ways for males of color to break into the middle class. However, breaking into the union has proven difficult. As mayor, what would you do to change this? Thank you.
And Mr. Connolly, you got the first shot at this.
I would start by enforcing the Boston Jobs Residence Policy, which requires that the majority of the jobs go to Boston residents, women and people of color. We haven't enforced it in this city, and part of that is because the building trades who Representative Walsh represents push back on it and want their seniority rules to control, I will allocate real positions in the city budget to enforcing the jobs residence policy and make sure that we're opening these doors for the entire city. I also have an economic development plan premised on wealth creation and supporting entrepreneurship in communities of color. We've got to look to go that way as well.
All right, Mr. Walsh.
First of all, my opponent, I've never seen him at the jobs policy, BRJP, discussing or talking about the numbers in Boston, but let me tell you what I've done. When I took over the building trades, I recognized right off the bat that we had an issue with not having enough people of color and women in the building trades, and I created a program called Building Pathways, which is a pre-apprentice program, which was we were able to get people of color and women into the building trades. When I created this program, it began as a pre-apprentice program to give people skills and give people the ability to have some training in construction. We put on a caveat by sitting down with the building trades and mandating that they take people into the building trades. So we've been very successful as far as starting that program. For the future, what I'd like to do is I want to bring trade schools back to all of the high schools in the city of Boston and give young people the opportunity that aren't going on a pathway to college, that they have a chance to go from high school into the trades so we can continue that pathway in. It's not simply just training people in high school and giving them the education they need, but also giving them that opportunity to get a job.
All right, about 30 seconds. I need to break. 15, we'll divide it. Anything else on unions? Mr. Connolly?
My hubs of opportunity proposal would put a vocational program in every high school. They were really destroyed over the past few decades, and I want to make sure we connect direct to employers. I want to see young people go become lab technicians in Longwood Medical Area.
And Mr. Walsh, wrap up this section.
In my economic development plan, I have put in there a disparity study so we can create more opportunities for contractors, minority-owned and women-owned contractors, so they have opportunities to get on some of these public funded jobs.
Marty Walsh, John Connolly. We'll take a little break here, take a breather as we approach the halfway point in the final debate of the race. A break for the candidates and our consortium stations. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
All right, we'll be rejoining our live debate between Boston mayoral candidates John Connolly and Marty Walsh in just a moment. I'm Emily Rooney, and I'm joined here by WGBH News political contributor Peter Kansas. We're in a brief intermission, so let's quickly review the debate so far. So I thought right off the bat that, the question about the push poll was interesting because John Connolly absolutely denied that his campaign had anything to do with the push poll. Jim O'Sullivan, good reporter for the Boston Globe, reported that, said in certain communities, Marty Walsh said, hey, he knew it happened. I know nothing of it. I didn't get a call, but either it happened or it didn't. But Connolly said his campaign had nothing to do with it.
I haven't heard about that. I think this whole allegation that this is a dirty campaign is bogus. Dirty campaigns were back in the Kevin White days, and they were really dirty. This is pretty civilized.
Yeah, this has been an incredibly clean campaign, if you ask me. The other interesting issue came again during the debate over the legislation that Marty proposed regarding binding arbitration. And they are once again, I thought John Connolly scored a few points by saying, it's been your livelihood. The people who helped you draft that legislation were people from the firefighters union. You took it to Beacon Hill. You are paid by the Building and Trades union, and that's why you would represent them.
Marty Walsh has gotten better at answering that question, but Connolly scored a home run on that. I mean, I thought that was his strongest performance to date on it, although Walsh has gotten better at answering it.
And apparently Twitter has picked up the fact that, that Marty Walsh said, well, we don't need another lawyer in City Hall, and that was, a good score for him there, too.
That was a good score. I don't know if people care about that, but as you and I said earlier, I think people have made up their minds. This debate is being staged for people like us, for the media. I don't think it's going to have a big effect on the public at large. They're going to look and see how this goes. Walsh is doing better. Connolly's winning.
They both look good, I think. I don't know who's winning, but so far they seem to be pretty even. John Connolly's answers are shorter. I think Walsh's time is taking advantage and taking a few more minutes to talk. All right, we're going to return now to moderator Artie Saul.
Welcome back to the final debate before next Tuesday's mayoral election in Boston. John Connolly, Marty Walsh. Let's get right back to it. It's important to have a vision for Boston, for both the residents and the businesses. We have a question from Carol Troxell, president of the Fadel Hall Merchants Association. Let's watch.
There are more than 100 businesses here at Faneuil Hall Marketplace. Many of these businesses are locally owned and operated mom-and-pop shops that have been here for more than 25 years. Our question for you today is, what is your vision of Faneuil Hall Marketplace? And will you continue to be an advocate for the merchants here as well as small businesses across the city, as Mayor Menino has been to us for the last 20 years? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Carol. Marty Walsh, you get the first response to this.
I think the vision of Faneuil Hall, as well as the vision for all of Boston small businesses, is to make sure we have a robust and small business community in the city of Boston. You know, I've traveled around this entire city of Boston since this race has gone on, and in Eggleston Square, we have a business community there, business district, and I was talking to an owner the other day, and they were talking to me about the concerns of having to buzz everybody into stores and the conditions of the street, and what's the commitment to the city of Boston to Eggleston Square. And I think the same thing can be said for Faneuil Hall. What's the commitment from the city of Boston? We need to make sure that we use every resource in our office, in the Public Works Department and in the Transportation Department, to make sure that we make sure Faneuil Hall is inviting, but not just Faneuil Hall, all business communities in our city. We have many business districts in this city that need help, need support, and they're just not getting it today.
Mr. Connolly.
Faneuil Hall is vitally important, particularly to tourism for Boston and drawing people in, so we want to make sure we support it. But the bigger question goes to, how do we support small and new businesses? I've made this a key platform in my economic development plan. I want to have a Buy Boston program that's going to connect our small businesses to our large businesses, so that if you're a caterer in Mattapan, I want to make sure our colleges and universities are using you to cater their events. If you're a small IT business in Dudley or Roslindale, I want to make sure our downtown businesses are using you for maintenance on their IT systems. And also want to have a Made in Boston venture capital fund, and this is an idea borrowed from the West Coast, where we could lend to smaller businesses at lower rates, help them gain access to capital so they can grow and create jobs.
What's the role of City Hall in creating jobs, Mr. Walsh?
It's very important. I mean, when you look at certain parts of Boston, and I'll use Roxbury as an example, we have 19% unemployment. Our poverty level is through the roof. We have less than 20% home ownership, and we have no opportunities for economy. There's no jobs there. We need to be, City Hall needs to bring jobs to the neighborhoods. We need to make sure that my economic development office will be bringing jobs not just to the downtown area, not just to the seaport, but to the local areas. You know, when we talk about education, improving education, that's important. It's important to close the achievement gap. But if we don't help parents to close their achievement gap as far as unemployment goes and employment, and not have opportunities to get good paying jobs, we're not doing a service. City Hall, we have a big opportunity here. I want to create a Boston Economic Development Authority. I'm going to change the structure of the BRA. I'm going to change the structure of the Department of Neighborhood Development, and I'm also going to change tourism, the opportunities for tourism in the city of Boston. I have a plan that looks at big business and small business and how we attract more business to the city of Boston, as well as take the businesses we have here in the city of Boston and allow them to grow. We had a company here, Fidelity, not too long ago, and when Fidelity expanded outside of Boston. We need to make sure that our companies are here and we keep them in the city of Boston.
And Mr. Connolly, what can City Hall do specifically, a mayor do specifically, to create jobs?
City Hall can do a whole lot. It's part of what I want to do in schools is keep them open at night so that we can have adult education and English as a second language to help offer skills to new Bostonians and Bostonians who are looking for some extra workforce training to get back into that job market and compete. We can create the partnerships with employers across this city to create opportunity. But one piece I want to do here is help more people start small businesses. I want to bring an entrepreneurship center to Roxbury and use the principles in the innovation district that we use for big tech companies. Let's use them for small businesses out in our neighborhoods. I want to bring it to Roxbury, and then I want to expand it to other neighborhoods.
All right, we'll leave that one. Let's move on to casinos. East Boston votes next week on a casino proposal. Without a clear partner for Suffolk Downs, how are people supposed to know what they're voting for? Mr. Connolly?
Well, I think the people of East Boston will decide what's in the best interest of that community. It's clearly troubling and very disturbing what happened with Caesars, though I think the Gaming Commission did their job. So they're going to look at the host community agreement, figure out if it's right for the neighborhood, and if they believe a partner will really be able to step in and get it done. But I've got great confidence that the voters will decide what's right for East Boston.
No partner for Suffolk Downs on that ballot.
Yeah, it is disturbing. It's disturbing that they don't have a partner there. And we also, you know, the vote is going to go happen next week, next Tuesday. As John mentioned, the voters of East Boston will decide what they want to do. I think what's going to be the challenge for the next mayor of the city of Boston, if the voters of East Boston decide to vote against a casino, then we're going to have to, the city of Boston will be responsible for making sure to see if Suffolk Downs can survive and what to do on that 160-acre land over in East Boston. Right. That's going to be a question that the next mayor is going to have to face.
You're running about a minute ahead and trying to equalize time here, Mr. Walsh. Let me stick with casinos for a moment. How does a casino make East Boston a better place to raise children?
Well, that's up to the people of East Boston to decide. I think the future of East Boston's in the waterfront, not in the casino or whatever would come to Suffolk Downs.
So you'd rather not see it?
No, I want the people of East Boston to decide, and I've stated that clearly the entire time, but I think East Boston's economic future is more in the waterfront, where we can preserve open space and access in some wonderful ways.
Would you like a casino in your neighborhood?
Would I like a casino in my neighborhood directly next to my house? Probably not, no. But again, I think that's up to the people of East Boston to decide. In the same way I said, if you were going to put a casino in West Roxbury, I would want the people of West Roxbury to decide.
How does a casino make a community a better place to raise children?
I mean, a casino certainly creates jobs and opportunities for folks to be able to raise a family. Right now in East Boston, Suffolk Downs has been losing business for the last 10 years, for the last decade. Many people that work there, and some of them I know personally, that have had an opportunity to raise their family, they're struggling. They don't know what to do. They don't have an education. They don't have the college degrees they need to be able to get a job in the private sector. And a lot of the jobs over there are basic, are fundamental jobs where people are cleaning floors and washing and doing things like that, waiting on tables. So it's an opportunity for people to get a job, to be able to raise their family.
Would you want one in your neighborhood?
If the people of my district wanted it, I'd certainly welcome it.
Do you think we'll ever see a casino built near Suffolk Downs or in conjunction with Suffolk Downs, Mr. Connolly?
I think we're going to find out next Tuesday, but I think this vote is going to be close, and we'll find out.
What about it, Marty Walsh?
I'm not sure. It's hard to say. Again, the people of East Boston, both sides in this issue have been very vocal and working very hard to get the issue across. And I think that what happened last week certainly puts a wrinkle into it. But again, the voters of East Boston will decide.
In earlier debates, you've both pushed this aside or found a way around it. If you live in East Boston, how do you vote on this on Tuesday? Marty Walsh.
Well, I supported the initial legislation that created gaming in Massachusetts, so I would support it.
If you live in East Boston, how do you vote next week?
I don't live in East Boston, and I want to let the people of East Boston decide. I will say this, I'm deeply troubled by what happened with Caesars. I'm deeply troubled. It would inform my judgment as I entered the booth, but this is up to the people of East Boston, who said to me when I went over there, please let us decide something that's going to disproportionately impact our neighborhood.
All right. I tried. Let me move to public safety. Another important hire coming up for the next mayor is the new police commissioner. Obviously, you want experience, but beyond that, what are you looking for? What's needed? What's missing in the management of the Boston Police Department? And Mr. Walsh, you get the first answer.
I think that's going to be another big decision that I'm going to be making as mayor of the city of Boston. We need to make sure that our police department reflects our communities in the entire city of Boston. We have 3 areas in this city that the crime is the highest, where there's many shootings. We need to make sure we have a police commissioner that's dedicated and committed to putting the right resources in those particular neighborhoods so we can reduce the violence in our streets. We need a police commissioner that's dedicated to going back to community policing. I think we've gotten away from community policing a little bit in the city of Boston. And we also need a police superintendent, commissioner that is going to talk about having a partner in the community. The community needs to be a partner in working with the police department to solve some of the issues that we have in the street. We have, like I said, in some neighborhoods we have high gang violence and high violence. We need to be able to treat that violence, and the police are a big part of that.
What are you looking for in a police commissioner?
I think it's about 4 pieces. The first is a real dedication to community policing, and that means every officer out there building relationships, not just a community service officer. And I want to see police officers knocking on doors the way politicians do, introducing themselves to residents in the community. The second is a willingness to take on a culture in there which has created an incredible disparity. We do not look like the city in the Boston Police Department. We need to be more diverse. Third is a real use of technology in an age where the commissioner's got to be on top of street terrorism by gangs and global terrorism, as we saw on Boylston Street. The final piece is recognize that safety is not all about law enforcement. I need a commissioner who wants to support a broad public health agenda to tackle issues like mental health, addiction, and trauma.
Quickly, minority candidate a priority for you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sticking with public safety, Mr. Connolly, is there racism in the Boston Police Department?
There's racism in all of Boston, institutional, systemic, structural racism, and we can see that in the Boston Police Department when we can look out and see not a single captain of color in our districts and a command staff that's overwhelmingly white, and as well through all ranks. So this needs to be addressed for sure. That would be a priority, as I mentioned, in my search for a commissioner, someone who can help shift this culture. One proposal I made was to have a pathway at Madison Park focused on criminal justice that would allow young people to do internships and year-round jobs in the Boston Police Department. And when they graduate, go in to a 2-year program in college, graduate from there and get guaranteed entrance into a restored police cadet program. That would allow a young person in Boston to know they can become a Boston police officer.
Is there racism in the Boston PD?
We have racism in the city of Boston that we have to deal with. I mean, we talk about one Boston, and we don't see one Boston today in the city of Boston. And we need to deal with some of the issues of the Boston Police Department. I completely agree with that. But I also, we need to make sure that we get into every single neighborhood and make sure there's equality in all neighborhoods of the city of Boston that doesn't happen today. You know, I'm proud to have the support of Charlotte Golar Ritchie and John Barros and Felix Arroyo in my campaign. They endorsed me since the primary. And we've talked about these different issues, about stereotyping young men and young women that are walking around our streets that feel that they can't walk around our streets because of who they are and the color of their skin. We need to change that in the city of Boston.
Very quickly, the allegation that there's discrimination in promotion in the Boston PD, true?
We have to come up with a system to make sure that we prepare people better to take those tests.
True.
We need promotion that's going to be based on merit and recognize that part of that equation is making sure we look like the whole city of Boston.
All right, let me move on to housing. A question from Dr. Karen McAlmond of the Boston chapter of Jack and Jill of America. Let's watch.
Gentlemen, many neighborhoods in Boston, especially Roxbury and Dorchester, are becoming gentrified. Would you be in favor of using public resources, creating incentives, and working with banks to help create opportunities for mortgages to help low and moderate income residents as well as the elderly to stay in their neighborhoods? I look forward to your response. Thank you.
And Mr. Walsh, you begin on this one.
The answer to the question about the banks is absolutely. We need to create more opportunities for people to be able to buy first-time home buyer programs in Boston. One of the problems we have, though, we also need to make sure we create more opportunities for employment so people can afford their houses. You know, I represent Dorchester now, and we're talking about building a lot of low-income housing in Boston, which we do. We need to look at that low-income housing and spread it across the city. But we really have to focus on how do we keep people, allow people the opportunity to stay in their neighborhoods. When I was campaigning in Dudley Square the other day, we're talking about people in Dudley Square concerned about bringing in industry to their neighborhood because of gentrification. We have to create more opportunities for people to be able to live in a house, to be able to buy a house. I think we should use public resources. I actually think we can use public land to be able to use it as part of the piece to build new housing. The land costs in a lot of deals are what prohibits new construction. If we can use public land for these land costs, the land will go back, revert onto the payroll. So I would suggest looking at using public land.
Mr. Connolly, housing.
We're seeing this happening in Dudley right now in a whole lot of parts of the entire city. And it impacts, I think about our seniors who have spent their life in a neighborhood, and it's who they are, and they've made that neighborhood great. And in some cases, they own a home, but they're watching condos pop up everywhere and drive the values up so they can't afford the taxes on a fixed income. In other cases, it's a renter, and you get someone swooping in, buying up properties, pushing the tenants out because they're going to convert them to condos. So I would embrace any and all programs that would help allow people in neighborhoods to stay in the place they call home. So I look at a soft second mortgage program, leaning on those banks to help them, to help make sure people can get access to borrow and stay in their home. That's it being the neighborhood overall. Other piece, BRA planning. Got to have a holistic plan to make sure that it's never about just all luxury housing or all affordable in a neighborhood. We need a healthy mix so everyone can find a pathway to home ownership.
One more quick one before we change format a bit. Today is the first anniversary of Hurricane Sandy. Dozens dead, many hurt and homeless, damage estimated at $65 billion. The next Sandy could hit another sea level city, Boston. Do you have a plan, Mr. Connolly, starting with you this time? What would you do to prepare Boston for the next superstorm? Very quickly from each of you.
I do have a plan. I put it out early on in this campaign. I also was the only elected official to serve on the Climate Change Leadership Committee that set the standards to reduce our carbon emissions. And I want to make sure, the mayor's got to be ready for this on day one. We would have had 83 million square feet of flood damage if we'd been hit at high tide by Sandy. So I want to see everything from emergency preparedness to lowering our carbon emissions in the city.
Mr. Walsh.
We certainly have to do a better plan with preparing for global warming. There's been a Green Ribbon Commission in the city of Boston that's been established to look at all the different challenges with the environment here in the city. I'd like to take that commission and grow it. I also, when we talk about planning in the city of Boston as far as new construction, we need to be prepared for that. Over in Charlestown, the Spalding Rehab Building was a building that was prepared to withhold the Superstorm Sandy. It's built on floating pylons. We have to really look at the city of Boston, and we also have to talk about how do we get the people in the city of Boston out in case of an...
We'll leave it at that. A chance now for the candidates to question each other. A coin toss decided it. Marty Walsh with the first question to John Connolly. Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. Let me just start here. There's been a lot of talk recently about negative campaigning in this campaign. And when an independent group who supports me attacked John, I condemned it and asked them to stop. John, the Boston Globe reported that your campaign has paid for phone calls. We spoke about this earlier tonight, attacking me with misleading negative information. Media reports today suggest that you may be planning to run a negative TV ad in the coming days. Now, I'd like to know that we can't control what happens with independent expenditures, but I'd like to ask you this. John, will you commit to me tonight not to only run positive ads for the rest of the campaign?
Marty? There was no push-pull against you, and everything that any of my ads will do will reflect exactly what I would say directly to you and what I say in the open public. The violation here was by your outside group, and I appreciate that you said, I don't want that kind of campaigning. But the problem was you opened the door for that kind of campaigning when you said that you wanted the outside money in this race. And I wish that you had had the willingness to stand up and say, we don't need outside money in this race. It should be about the two candidates and the two campaigns, and then we could have a completely positive campaign. But instead, what's happened to date is we've had tens of thousands of flyers put out across this city that savaged me and my family. And you may not have liked it, but you opened the door for it to happen.
I didn't get an answer to that question.
Quick rebuttal. 30
I'd like
seconds.
to ask John again. Were you willing to stay positive in this campaign on your ads on TV?
And Marty, what I'm saying to you clearly here is we're not going to run a negative campaign. We haven't. Everything that my campaign will say, whether it's a TV ad or a flyer, will be based on the exact things I have said to you in these debates.
All right, let's move on. Mr. Connolly to Mr. Walsh.
Marty, you once told a reporter in reference to your role in unions that you would never bite the hand that feeds you. And then when you were asked about that recently, that reference to that quote, you said, well, I wasn't running for mayor when I said that. And this brings me back to this point that you've been paid $175,000 in 2012 in your role as president of a group of unions. You've had over, I believe it's $2 million, maybe it's $1 million. I can't keep track of all your outside spending at this point, but you've had $1 million at least come in support of your campaign from unions. You're filing legislation for unions which would hurt the city's financial health. You haven't been independent in your role as a state rep. How are you going to be independent as mayor?
Thank you, John, for the question. I certainly have expressed many times on this trail of my independence from organized labor, and I've also expressed the fact that I'm proud of organized labor. My father was a laborer. My father worked with his hands every day in his back. He worked extremely hard. He never complained about the elements, working out in the cold or the wind or the sun. When I was a kid, when I came down with cancer, my father, the union, was the ones who stepped up to keep my family above board. I am proud of who I support. I'm proud of the work I've done with working families, but I also know that I can stand up to them when I have to, and I've stood up to the unions in many occasions here as a state legislator, as also as the head of the building trades where I've stood up with them. So I certainly know, as the mayor of the city of Boston, I'll be able to stand up to unions to make sure that we'll get the best deal on the table for the taxpayers and the residents of the city.
Right, I need to step in here to get us back on time and make sure you each get 2 questions. Next question from Mr. Walsh to Mr. Connolly.
Right.
Keep it brief, please.
Yes. The people of Boston have been through a lot over the last few years, with the recession hitting lots of families. While the economy is slowly starting to improve, it's important for the next mayor to focus on doing everything he can to support creation of good jobs for all residents of the city of Boston. John, can you name me 3 specific things you've done as a city councilor to create new jobs in Boston?
Absolutely. I chaired the Environment Committee on the City Council, where we leveraged the Environmental Stimulus Grant that created green jobs in Boston, and a whole lot of them. And it was a great model. We used it some of the money to go to community-based organizations who trained the workers, who were then hired by companies like Next Step Living in the Innovation District. So that led to the creation of a whole lot of jobs. Second, we can talk about the programs relative to expanding the Innovation District. That came through the city budget process. We created the Innovation District, working with Mayor Menino. That's led to countless jobs. Now, I'll be the first to say it's the companies that do the hiring, but the Innovation District doesn't happen if I don't take those votes on the council. We also leveraged stimulus grants in a number of areas to save jobs, and I think that's really important. Your campaign made an allegation the other day about that was totally false.
Mr. Connolly, all right. I need to keep us back on time here. Final question of this segment, Mr. Connolly to Mr. Walsh.
Marty, you serve as chair of the, or served as chair of the House Ethics Committee. Yes. You were paid $15,000, I believe, in 2010 and 2011 total in that role. You never held a public hearing. And I'm wondering if it was just the case that there was no need for the House Ethics Committee up on Beacon Hill during those 2 years.
Thank you, John. John, as an attorney, you certainly know that the rules of the House Ethics Committee precludes us from talking about any cases that came in front of the committee. You would know that, or maybe you don't know that, but as an attorney, I'm assuming you should know that. And the committee would only have a report if there was a finding of a case that we had.
So there was no finding on any case you had, and yet at the same time, there was a state representative who's now in jail for committing election fraud, and it would appear the House Ethics Committee took no action on that, certainly never filed a report on that.
Well, as you know, John, by law, I'm prohibited from talking about any case in front of the state.
But you did say if you took any action on it, you would have to file a report.
If there was a final action on it, we would
So
be
there
filing
was
a
no
report.
final action on that matter?
In the House of Representatives.
I'm going to ask one final question of both of you. Whichever one of you is elected, you have to follow a tough act. Tom Menino. How should we measure you 100 days into your administration? Mr. Connolly, we'll start with you. Make it brief, please. What's the standard? What's the bar?
I want people to see a top-to-bottom audit of the Boston Public Schools as we begin to shift the resources down to the school site level. I hope people will judge me on that. I want to see a citywide summit that's going to lead to a comprehensive plan for safe and healthy neighborhoods. I hope people will judge me on that.
And Mr. Walsh, the bar for you, 100 days into your administration.
The reflection of my cabinet, number one, to make sure my cabinet reflects what I've been talking about, the reflection of the city of Boston, making sure the choices that I have are taking care of the young people in the city of Boston and the seniors in the city of Boston, that we address the needs and issues of those vulnerable populations in some cases in the first 100 days, and also a master plan to deal with transportation, education, and public safety.
All right, we'll leave it at that. The hour has flown by. Time left for closing statements by each candidate. 45 seconds each. Mr. Connolly, you're first.
Thank you, RD. I appreciate it. And I want to take a moment to talk directly to the voters of Boston. I'm John Connolly. I'm a Boston Public Schools parent. I'm a former teacher who's taught children from every neighborhood in Boston. I believe our future starts with our schools. I have been a bold leader willing to take on the tough decisions and make the hard decisions that are needed to transform our Boston Public Schools. I don't do this because I'm a single issue candidate. I do this because our schools connect us to every other issue. If we want to have safe and healthy neighborhoods, we need better schools. If we want to have a stronger economy, we need better schools. I hope you'll give me a vote on November 5th, and together we'll make sure Boston works for everyone.
And Mr. Walsh, your closing statement.
I'd like to thank you and the consortium for tonight's debate. I'm a proud son of immigrant parents who came to this country to build a better life. I grew up in a great neighborhood in Dorchester. I grew up in a 3-family house. I've overcome challenges in my life, cancer as a young boy, alcoholism as an adult. I got elected to the Massachusetts House of Representatives. In my entire time in the legislature, I've spent building better schools, creating opportunities for folks, and also allowing people the second chances and working on public safety issues. As mayor of the city of Boston, I want to continue those opportunities to make sure that every child has an opportunity to get a good education, that every parent is not concerned when their young person leaves their house that they're not going to come home at the end of the night, and to make sure that every senior citizen has the services they deserve and they need to make sure that their life's healthy and safe in their final year. So I'd like to ask you, the voters, for your vote on November 5th for Mayor of the City of Boston. I'd also like to thank you for tonight, and go Red Sox.
I think we can all agree on that. And there you have it, the final debate of Boston's race for mayor. Our thanks to Marty Walsh and John Connolly for their time tonight and their answers. Election day, of course, is Tuesday, November 5. Turn out, make a choice, make a difference. For the 7 News Studios and the Boston Media Consortium, I'm R.D. Saul. Good night.
That concludes tonight's live Boston mayoral debate between John Connolly and Marty Walsh. I'm Emily Rooney, and I'm joined once again in studio by WGBH News political analyst Peter Kadzis. Well, Peter, I think one of the big startling moments of tonight's debate was when R.D. Saul asked about the balance of power in the Boston Police Department, and John Connolly was the first to say there's racism in every department in Boston, and the Boston Police Department included, and then Marty Walsh said the exact same thing. I think Ed Davis and Tom Menino are going to take exception to that.
That's for sure. I thought both overstated it. There are definitely racial problems. There are issues of racial sensitivity. There are issues of promotion. But I thought racism was too strong a word. And I may be in the minority in people in the press, but I think Ed Davis has gotten a bad rap on this, and I think former candidates like Bill Walczak would agree with that. Tom Menino, I don't think Tom Menino has a prejudice bone in his body. People can criticize him for other things. Prejudice is not one of them.
I think that's going to be an issue tomorrow. The other thing that came up again right at the end during the candidate-to-candidate questioning was the thing about the push poll, negative. You know, John Connolly said unequivocally, I did not do that. There was no push poll for my campaign. Marty Walsh is still accusing him of that.
This is small potatoes. Look, as far as dirty campaigns go, this isn't one. Maybe there have been instances of it, but neither the Union Flyer nor the push poll upsets me. This isn't like Kevin White.
No, it is not. All right, Peter Kadzis, thank you. This has been a live WGBH News special presentation of the final televised debate between Boston mayoral candidates John Connolly and Marty Walsh. On behalf of Peter Kadzis and myself, thank you for joining us on WGBH2 and 89.7 WGBH Radio. Good night.
Next time on The African Americans, slavery tests the ideals of the new republic.
Slavery violated the most basic principle of the American Revolution, that all human beings were created equal.
The African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross.